You know, at the end of the 20th century, it really felt like we'd figured it all out, like history had a clear winner. One big idea was supposed to be the blueprint for our future. But, well, the last few decades have told a very different story, and they've shown some massive cracks in that triumphant vision. So today, let's dive into the 21st century crisis of liberalism.
I mean, you could really feel it in the air, especially after the Berlin Wall came down. A political scientist, Francis Fukuyama, he captured this mood perfectly. He called it the end of history. And he wasn't just saying it was another victory. No, he meant it was the final one, the last stop. The ultimate destination for all of humanity had finally been reached. Pretty bold, right?
So yeah, this huge idea was literally called the end of history. The thinking went something like this. After the Cold War, all those giant ideological battles that defined centuries of human history, they were over, settled. It looked like one system had come out on top, and it was there to stay. For good.
So what was this winning formula exactly? Well, it basically boiled down to two key things. First, you've got representative democracy. People get a say in how they're governed. And second, a market-based economy, the kind that runs on competition. That's it. This simple little combo was supposed to be the universal blueprint for progress, everywhere.
But that victory lap didn't last very long. Almost as soon as the 21st century kicked off, that perfect blueprint started to look, well, not so perfect. It started showing some really serious cracks, mostly because the world just refused to follow the script.
And it makes you wonder, right? Was this really the end of history, or was it just the quiet before a whole new storm of ideas came rushing in?
And oh boy, was it a storm. Instead of the world just quietly falling in line with this one model, the 21st century brought a wave of powerful challenges from all sides. And they weren't just nibbling at the edges, they were taking aim at the very foundations of liberalism.
Okay, so let's break these critiques down. We're going to walk through a few of the most powerful arguments that popped up, and you'll see how each one questions a really core piece of the liberal idea.
All right, first up, the communitarian critique. This one really grew out of a feeling of alienation, a sense that in modern life, something super important was getting lost in the shuffle. Communitarians pointed to what they saw as a huge flaw in liberalism, this idea of the unencumbered self. Basically, they said, hey, liberalism is so focused on individual freedom that it forgets we're not just isolated atoms floating around. Our identities are shaped by our communities, our history, our culture. And the big fear here was that if you push individualism too far, you just get a bunch of egoists who can't work together to solve big problems.
Okay, next up. Around the same time, another really powerful critique was gaining steam. This one argued that for, about half the world's population, liberalism's promise of equality felt kind of hollow.
Yeah, we're talking about the feminist critique. Critics here pointed out that these supposedly neutral concepts in liberalism, like personhood, were anything but neutral. They argued it was really a mask for the existing power structures, specifically male domination. And it completely failed to address the deep systemic discrimination that women were facing. You can't just solve that with a few abstract rights on paper.
All right, then you have the world getting more and more connected. Globalization, migration, it's all accelerating. And out of this new reality of super diverse societies comes another big challenge, one that really asks, can liberalism actually be a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody?
This is the challenge from multiculturalism. The idea here is that identity isn't just about you, the individual. It's collective. It's tied to your ethnicity, your culture, your group. But here's the really radical part. This viewpoint argues that a group's values should be respected, even if they totally clash with liberal ideals. Now that is a direct hit on liberalism's claim to be the one universal truth.
And it wasn't just these philosophical debates happening. A completely different kind of challenge was building steam, one that wasn't based on secular philosophy, but on divine authority.
And we're talking about religious fundamentalism. This wasn't just a polite debate, it was a head-on ideological confrontation. You saw these movements rising up in different forms across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And they presented a worldview that was just fundamentally opposed to core liberal values like individual choice and keeping religion separate from the state.
And finally, there's a challenge that wasn't just a theory written in a book. Nope, this was a real-world, honest-to-goodness success story. And it was built on a completely different set of values.
I'm talking about the East Asian economic model. This was a total game changer. See, where liberal economics is all about competition and individual self-striving, Many of these incredibly successful East Asian economies were drawing on things like Confucian values, prioritizing social harmony and stability over rugged individualism. And this was powerful proof that, hey, maybe you can modernize and become super prosperous without having to copy-paste the whole Western liberal package.
So, you've got all these critiques coming from all these different angles, and they're all gaining traction. The big question became pretty obvious. If liberalism isn't the final answer, then what is? What comes next?
Well, some thinkers, the postmodernists like Richard Rorty, they put it very bluntly. They said liberalism is just a meta-narrative that is dead. A meta-narrative is just a fancy term for a big, all-encompassing story that tries to explain everything. And they were saying, yeah, that story is over. This wasn't the end of history, it was just the end of another chapter.
What this view is really saying is that no single theory, not communism, not fascism, not even liberalism, can be the ultimate explanation for the world forever. These big, grand theories, they have their moment in the sun, right? But eventually, they all fade away and something new takes their place.
And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If liberalism's throne is now empty, what new idea is waiting in the wings to take its place? Well, out of all this chaos, a major contender has emerged. It's an idea called pluralism, and it's fundamentally different. Unlike liberalism, pluralism isn't looking for one correct way for everyone to live. Instead, it says, look, there are many valid ways of life out there. Some are liberal, some are not. And the whole goal is just to figure out how they can all peacefully coexist.
And that, right there, is a massive shift in thinking. It might mean we're moving out of an era that was all about finding one single universal ideology and into a new world that has to learn how to live with many of them, all at once.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question, really. Is this future of many competing values, a pluralist world, is that where we're headed, no matter what? Or can liberalism, which was the great survivor of the 20th century, somehow adapt and reinvent itself for the totally new challenges of the 21st? The truth is, the final pages of this chapter are still being written.